Hi and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Jessica Jones Season 2. In this video I will give a full-length review of Season 2 of Jessica Jones in its entirety. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for all of Season 2. If you haven't seen up to the end of Season 2 of Jessica Jones, you will not want to watch this video. Otherwise, some things will be spoiled for you. So Jessica Jones, I really enjoyed this show. If you watch my previous reviews on Jessica Jones, this is Season 1 was one of my favorite seasons of these Netflix Marvel shows, along with Daredevil Season 1 and The Punisher Season 1. I think these were the three best years of the Netflix shows. It's hard to say which one I prefer. I think I prefer Jessica Jones over The Punisher, but it's been so long since I've seen Daredevil, it's hard for me to say which one of those I think was better, but suffice to say I think all three of them are in the top, where the other ones not quite as good. So the big question coming in is Season 2 going to be better than Season 1? In fact, I was really interested in what some other people had to say about this. So before I watched the season, I watched a lot of spoiler-free reviews, and a lot of them were saying they thought Season 2 was better than Season 1, that Season 2 got more in depth with the characters, and it was a more dynamic story, and they were really enjoying Season 2 and thought this is even better than Season 1. But once I finished the season, and then more reviews started coming out that covered more of the entire show, because it was a bit more time had passed since the season had been released. And then I was actually seeing a lot of reviews saying they thought Season 1 was way better and Season 2 was a shadow compared to it and didn't live up at all to what Season 1 set. In fact, I think there seemed to be more of this opinion going about. So from what I've seen so far, the opinions seem to be pretty mixed on Season 2. Some like it, some don't. I personally I think the line is very distinct on how one feels about Kilgrave, because I myself admit I love Kilgrave. He was an amazing villain, and a lot of people will also say he was one of the best villains in any Marvel property. But the thing I noticed this when I did my review on Season 1 is I thought the show was almost too focused on Kilgrave at one point and became the Kilgrave show featuring Jessica Jones, and that aspect of it really bothered me, because I wanted more of Jessica Jones because I really liked this character. I noticed that some people who really love Season 1 actually had the opposite view, that they actually didn't care much for Jessica Jones at all, and said that if it wasn't for Kilgrave, the season wouldn't be good, and the only thing that made the season good was Kilgrave. So people who had that attitude, I find, are the one who do not like Season 2. Because Season 2, of course, doesn't feature Kilgrave at all and focuses more on Jessica Jones. So if that was your attitude, I don't really care for Jessica Jones, then I understand that's why you don't like Season 2. Whereas myself, I wanted to see more of Jessica Jones. Like I specifically said, there was talk about, oh, maybe they'll bring Kilgrave back to life or something because he was such a great villain. So glad they didn't do anything like that. I was actually noted that I wanted to see a season of Jessica Jones without Kilgrave, because Kilgrave so dominated Season 1. I didn't really get as much Jessica Jones as we needed. I didn't really get a feel for her character. So I was very rewarded in that regard, that I did get a lot more about this character. But when someone asks me which season I like better, Season 1 or 2, I can't really say. It's hard for me to say, because there are things I liked about Season 2 better than Season 1. I think Season 2 corrected a lot of mistakes that Season 1 had, but on the other hand, it failed to capture that greatness of Season 1. It wasn't as engaging or as draw you in suspenseful as Season 1 was. So while it corrected a lot of the mistakes, at the same time it lacked the element that made Season 1 really great. So I don't know, it's hard for me to say which one I like better, because I like them both, but for different reasons. It's like they each sort of their highlights are different. So I can see why people would be so split. Some people saying season 1 is way better, and other people saying season 2 is way better, because it kind of depends on your personal tastes and what you're in for. For me, I like them both in different ways, so I can't, it's really hard. I don't know if I'll ever make the definitive decision on which one is better, because to me, they're kind of both the same in terms of quality, but they're for totally different reasons. They satisfy totally different desires that I have coming in watching a TV show. So I'll structure this review by saying what I like better than season 1 and what I didn't like about season 2 that I thought failed to live up to season 1. So let me start with what I liked better than season 1, what I thought season 2 did better, and what I mean specifically by saying it corrected some of the mistakes of season 1. First of all, better paced, less filler. In fact, I heard some people complain that they thought the season was poorly paced, and I disagree. Just like it's the same people who said this about Iron Fist, which I actually like more than most people like. I'd probably put Iron Fist as 4th after those top 3 I mentioned, although season 2 would probably be above Iron Fist. But anyway, yeah, because I think in the case of Jessica Jones season 2 and Iron Fist, people complain of it being poorly paced because it was too slow. But I actually think you need that slow pace in order to have a steady pace. Because the issue with pretty much every Marvel Netflix show, except for The Defenders, who had the opposite issue, but I won't get into that. But like both seasons of Daredevil, first season of Jessica Jones, The Punisher, Luke Cage, and, well, no, not so much Iron Fist, but those ones, they blew through the storyline too quickly. And so when you got to, like, around episode 9 or 10, the last 3 episodes felt stretched out and kind of unnecessary and just there to meet the quota of episodes. So in other words, the season would have been better had they had a shorter season, like say 8 or 10 episodes. 13 was too long, and the storyline felt very poorly paced and stretched out in order to fill up this runtime. I didn't feel that was the case with season 2 of Jessica Jones. I know some people said they did, but I think because it was slower, it moved at a slower pace, but it didn't blow through the story and then like, oh, stretch out, here's a lot of filler so we can just stretch it out like the Punisher did with the storyline, that stupid guy having that bombing or whatever. That storyline was so freaking unnecessary. So Jessica Jones didn't do anything like that. Like all the storylines were really well paced. They were slow moving, which I think is some people mistaken that for being poorly paced, but that's not poorly paced. That's taking your time. There's a difference between slow pace and filler, and this was slow pace, not filler. Whereas season 1 of Jessica Jones, the last 3 episodes, there was a lot of filler, like stuff that didn't need to be there, but that was just there to fill up the runtime. Where here, everything all contributed to the story or the subplot, depending, but it was done at a slow pace. Another thing I liked better about season 2 is the supporting characters. Season 1 had a lot of really bad supporting characters that didn't work, like particularly the neighbors. The brother and sister were completely annoying, and they had like the support group for Kilgrave victims, and even Malcolm was it didn't care for that character very much. He was very whiny, and there is very interesting, and all these supporting characters and side plots didn't feel like they needed to exist. And on that note, another thing I liked is that all of the side plots in this season were actually interesting and worked. Like in season 1, Hogarth had the side plot about her wife and wanting to split up and find dirt on her, and that seemed completely unnecessary. I was not interested in that at all. Whereas here, Hogarth's side plot involves her finding out she has a debilitating disease and she's trying to sort of find help, and she gets conned by this person that she falls for, who's taken care of. That was very interesting, and I thought that actually played out really well, and the arc and how Hogarth just turned like totally cold by the end of it. That really worked, and just overall, like the side plots involving Malcolm was interesting, and Trish, how she was on her quest to sort of, it explored her envy of Jessica Jones's powers, which I think was really, really interesting thing to explore. Plus, I love the dynamic between Trish and Jessica, as I think that was explored a lot more this season. So I think that was better done as well. And speaking of Malcolm, he was much better in this season. As I said, in season 1, I didn't even like this character. Who was just seemed like the show was mocking him, and that made me uncomfortable because he was portrayed as a victim. He was a victim of drug abuse, and he was a victim of Kilgrave, who turned him into a drug addict. And the show seemed to portray him as sort of a whiny character that you want to mock and make fun of, and that didn't sit right with me. But this season, he was shown as more of a fully capable character who was actually, being put down by Jessica, treated like shit, and still put up with her shit for most of it until the end. He finally realized that he needs to branch out on his own, and also dealt with his personal issues and how he was sleeping with a lot of women as a substitute for his drug addiction and stuff like that. But overall, he wasn't a whiny character. He was a very capable character, a very interesting character. He was actually shown he was quite a muscular guy, which surprised me because in season 1 he was portrayed as a pansy. So this was an uninteresting character that they made into an interesting character this season. So I was very impressed with that. Also, as I mentioned, this season focuses more on Jessica Jones, which is what I really like. We get more of her character dynamic. We get more about her superpowers, because that wasn't a complaint I had about season 1, was that Jessica Jones' superpowers seemed unnecessary. Like they were just there so they could slap the Marvel name onto the show, but it seems like you could have the show be about this, mind control Kilgrave guy and not even have Jessica's powers. Plus her powers sucked. She constantly got her ass kicked in season 1, and that really bothered me. Where here in season 2, well, when she got her ass kicked, it was by someone, her mother, who had even stronger powers than her, so it made sense. Other than that, her powers were shown as being useful. They focus on the fact that she has powers and how this affected her life, and we actually see her do a lot of good with these powers, and then not just a waste of time, not just a sidestep just thrown in there just so they can slap the Marvel name on it. So I like that. And plus, we just learn more about her character. We get her backstory. Actually that flashback episode we got that was taking place entirely in the past was amazing. That was great to sort of flesh out her character. You could see the progression, how she was she had that hint of cynicism, but she was more of a chipper, more sort of happy-go-lucky character. And then after her boyfriend got killed, which we find out is actually from her mother, and then that sort of took her to the spiral to this, and of course Kilgrave, and kind of Kilgrave, of course, affected her character a lot, where to the point now she's like extremely cynical alcoholic type. So it was really interesting to get that backstory, and of course learning more about her family and how this has affected her. I think this was sort of touched on in season 1, how the loss of her family has really affected her, but they focused more on that in season 2, and I think that's great. I think they did a really great job of that. And plus, Jessica's relationship with Oscar, her super, that was another really good subplot that I thought worked really well, better than her relationship with Luke Cage, which to be honest, I didn't quite buy. That just seemed to be thrown in there to be like, hey, here's this cameo from this other superhero who's going to get his show soon. And their relationship never really worked for me. Whereas her relationship with Oscar totally worked, as they started off very adversarial, but then she saved his son's life, and then he helped him get his son back. I mean, that whole thing, I think, worked out really well, and I think they integrated him at times into the main plot really well. And also, I kind of touched on this before, but season 1 was almost disturbing to a fault. Like, don't get me wrong, sometimes I like disturbing movies and shows because they bring up good issues, but the way season 1 dealt with the issue of Kilgrave, like taking over people's minds, that I mentioned, the support group for victims of him, kind of was like an allegory for rape victims, but then they would treat these characters like shit, and they would make the audience want to not like them, like treat them like they're whiny brats, and that made me extremely uncomfortable if they're meant to be analogy for rape victims. And plus the way they had the character, I can't remember her name, but the woman at the start of the season 1 who Kilgrave made her kill her parents, like that was that whole storyline was disturbing, and a lot of stuff that Kilgrave did that was just over the top disturbing. And I didn't totally ruin season 1. As I said, I still love season 1, but it made me uncomfortable, and it was a drawback of season 1 in my opinion. And season 2 didn't have anything like that. It strayed away from doing anything like that. All the storylines were in the comfort zone. None of them seemed to sort of be bashing victims or anything like that. Even like the way they dealt with Hogarth and her disease was very well handled. And plus, of course, Jessica, finding out about her mother who kills people, and we learned about the Dr. Karl who took care of her money, and he's portrayed as like this villain at first, but he turns out to be a lot more dynamic than that. And so that leads me to my final point of what I liked better in season 2 is more dynamic characters. Like, it wasn't as black and white. I mean, they tried to flesh out Kilgrave a bit with his backstory, but then he just turned out to be an evil guy anyway. Whereas here, we think that Jessica's mother is evil, and we think that the Dr. Karl is evil, but they're not. We actually find out there's a lot more to them than what you suspected, and I like that. It has a sense of realism, a sense of dynamic storytelling that I really enjoyed, and I thought came out really well. I know there's a lot of people complaining, the ones who didn't like season 2, said, oh, there's no clear villain. This is a Marvel show. I want a villain. Maybe it's me. I'm not that big of a fan of comic book or superhero shows or movies in general. In fact, the only reason I like the Netflix ones is because they don't full-on resemble superhero movies or superhero comic book stuff. It's not as simple. I don't really need to have a flat-out villain. It's a plus for me that there is no straight-out villain. I think the best villains are the ones you can sympathize with, the ones that are dynamic, the ones who you can relate to. And so, in some ways, I did like her mother and Karl better. Alright, so now let me get into what I thought was worse than season 1, when season 2 failed to live up to season 1. And the first of this is that it didn't have any blow me away moments like season 1 did. Like, season 1 had like some amazing episodes, some amazing moments that were just like, oh my god, and had you clamoring to, go onto Netflix, you gotta watch that next episode, you gotta, fuck sleep, who needs sleep, I can stay up till 6 a.m, I can, even though I have to be at work at 7, and watch all these episodes because I have to watch them, it's so good. Season 2 wasn't like that. Season 2 was like, whatever, I can watch the next episode whenever I feel like it, I'll get to it whenever, it's not that important. And that's not to say season 2 was bad, it just wasn't as engaging and draw you in, hold you, and have like these amazing moments that season 1 had. So it was stick less in the mind. As I said, it was more of a slow burn. And another thing I thought it failed to live up to season 1 is the antagonists weren't nearly as interesting as Kilgrave. Now, this may seem to contradict what I just said about them being dynamic characters, which I do enjoy, the fact they were dynamic characters, but they didn't have that ticking clock, the ticking time bomb element that Kilgrave had, and plus the fact that Kilgrave was such an unbeatable character. It gave our heroes a nearly impossible task to go against. Plus, he was one evil fucker. Whereas I did enjoy the fact that Jessica's mother was dynamic, but has a sort of, obstacle for our heroes to overcome. She didn't really do much. She didn't really work in that way, nor did Karl, really. If we look at it from that perspective, she's just someone who has Jessica's superpowers, but more of them, which is something Marvel has done like a billion times before, so that was very uninspired. So in that way, these villains fail to live up to what Kilgrave gave to season 1. And of course, the last thing I'll say that season 2 failed to live up to season 1 was it was just overall less exciting, less engaging. As I said, there's nothing wrong with having a slow character-based story, but as I said, it doesn't have that draw that makes you want to stay up till 6 a.m. and watch episode after episode. So, let me get into some other things, more specifically about Season 2. And I'll get into things that I liked and things I didn't like about Season 2 that don't really have anything to do with Season 1, just talking about Season 2 now. So some other things I liked about Season 2 was Jessica, the fact that they killed off the Simpson character, what's his face, who was like Nuke or whatever. Like, I mentioned this in my Season 1 review. He was a big drawback of Season 1 for me. He was just such a stupid character, and it feels like they were just doing it. So, here's this Nuke guy from the comic book. Let's throw him in there. And it was just the way it was done was really clunky. I did not care for this character or his journey at all. And so Season 2, when they showed him again, I'm like, oh no, not him. They're going to make him the main villain. Oh god, he's such a... But they killed him off. I loved it. I think that was the right move. They recognized that this character wasn't working, that he wasn't interesting. So instead of, whatever the metaphor is, like building the hill and dying on it, they realized, look, we'll just get rid of him because he's not working. And I love that. And that transitioned well into a storyline for Trish out of the season. So that was great. Another thing I liked about the season is that it explores Jessica's moral ambiguity. Is she a hero or is she a villain? And it starts off by doing this by having, people sort of put her down for killing a man, Kilgrave. And she, of course, tries to justify it, but you can tell that even her, she's like sort of not that okay with it. And this, of course, is explored a lot in the specific episode where she sees Kilgrave, an image of her in her mind, which I could tell what they were going to do from the trailers. And plus, there was such a likable villain, they couldn't help themselves. They had to have him at least once, even if he's just an aberration in her mind. But that worked well because it happened right after she was forced to kill someone. And she was really regretted doing it, so it would work perfectly as like the side of her trying to justify, how killing people is okay, but at the same time, the fact that it was Kilgrave sort of speaks to her inner self how much she's against it, because it's saying that she's becoming like Kilgrave, which is the last thing that she wanted to do. And just throughout the entire season, just the way they played with her struggling with it, because when it comes to her mother, should she help him, because the hero thing to do would be to lock her up, but that she's her mother and she's dealing with her own personal. So that internal struggle was played very well. And also I like how speaking of her mother, how she tries to see good in her. Like, they kind of did the storyline in season 1 with Kilgrave, where Kilgrave was like, I want to be good, let's team up and be a superhero duo. And so when they were doing it in season 2, it felt like they were doing the same ground. In fact, Jessica even mentions this, which I think was brilliant on the writer's part, but her mother rightfully points out, you're comparing me to Kilgrave, is that how you see me? And it's true, there is a huge difference between her and Kilgrave, as Kilgrave was a moralist, selfish fuck, where she wasn't. She was well-meaning, but just because of her, conditioning or superpowers or whatever, has this temper that she can't control, and overwhelming all the people she killed to protect herself and the ones she loves. Obviously, she didn't need to kill them, especially the cop that she killed at the end, but that has to do with her flaw, which more has to do with what the operations and the surgery and whatever the hell Dr. Karl did to her. So you could say it wasn't really her fault. So that's actually really dynamic. So when they do team up to save the lives of the people from the car crash, it does show genuinely that she does have good in her and isn't just a straight up villain. So when Trish kills her at the end, that's a really dynamic storytelling. So let me get to my final point, is that the ending isn't as simple. It's not like Kilgrave, let's kill the bad guy, we win the day. It's a lot more complex than that. Jessica was even going to help the villain get away until Trish came and killed her. Was Trish right to do this? This was her mother, plus it's killing someone. But on the hand, this is a criminal who could possibly kill a bunch of people because this is a superpowered mad woman. So there's a lot of gray in that, and a lot of, you can sort of speculate, you can debate this. Was this morally correct? Or was it not? And I love that. That is dynamic storytelling at its best. And plus the fact that having Jessica crying over her dead mother, even though this is like the villain, it was such a powerful, touching scene and a great way to end the season. And plus now her and Trish, who are all seen as an unstoppable team, as the two sisters that love each other and now at odds with each other, which is another really interesting way to end the season. It opens it up for season 3, which I hope we don't have to wait another 2 years for. So now let me get to other issues I had with season 2, things that I didn't like about the season. So first of all, this is a thing, some people might see this as a minor thing, but this is something that grabbed me right away and it kind of irritated me. No mention of the Defenders. It seems like, I know the Defenders wasn't a popular show, and to be honest, it wasn't a very good one, so I can see why it wasn't popular, but I'm very much against them trying to retcon it because of that. It existed, they need to acknowledge that it exists. And in particular, like, there's absolutely no mention whatsoever. I kept waiting for even the slightest hint. And the only thing that even comes anywhere close to this is Foggy's appearance. We get a brief appearance of Foggy, which didn't really need to be there. It was just like, hey, here's Foggy, and that's about it. And it had nothing to do with the Defenders, really. It was about, his relationship to Hogarth, which we saw in actually Daredevil Season 2, and talking about Rand, which has more to do with Iron Fist, so nothing about the Defenders was really mentioned. And the thing is specifically, Jessica Jones had a lot of character development, and the Defenders, because the Defenders started with her storyline, with her dealing with the fact that she just killed Kilgrave and how this affects her, and mainly it deals with the fact that she doesn't want to view herself as a hero. So she goes through her whole thing where she meets up to, the other Defenders, and they want to team up to take on the bad guys, and she's very resistant to this because she doesn't see herself as a hero. But eventually, and through their struggles, she learns to see herself as a hero, and she works with these other superpowered people to do good, and she actually ends up using her powers to save the lives of Luke Cage and Iron Fist when they were about to plummet to their death in an elevator shaft. She uses her jumping abilities and strength to save the elevator, and she makes they think that Matt Murdock is dead, and so that was tragic for her, and so she had this, that was a huge building block for her character. No mention of this whatsoever. In fact, she's right back to being the loathsome, I don't want to be a hero, which was really annoying because it makes it act like she had no development in this regard, where in fact she had a lot of character development in this regard. So this really bothered me. It made me feel like the Netflix Marvel Universe might be trying to retcon shows that weren't popular. So maybe they'll try to pretend Iron Fist doesn't exist yet now because it wasn't popular. And maybe they're just kind of trying to... And in fact, the actress Kristen Ritter once mentioned she doubt that there will be another season of The Defenders, probably because it wasn't popular. So it seems like, oh, well, we'll just erase this from history and just focus on each show on its own, which I'm not happy with. I'm sorry, but I'm not. I mean, I'm all for them focusing more on the show rather than having, shameless cameos, but you can't pretend things that already exist don't exist. That's just bad writing. Anyway, another issue I had was that other PI guy, Chen, I believe his name was. Waste of time. I didn't care for this character. He was kind of a cliche, I'm the bad guy opposition. And the only time I kind of liked him was when they captured him and they let him live. And he was saying that he wasn't trying to kill Jessica, just his mother. I mean, it's kind of okay then. But for most of the story, this is just an annoying character. Didn't care for him. Another thing that kind of bothered me was Trish's drug addiction to the inhaler. I mean, this reminds me, I don't know, not everyone watching this would have seen Travelers, but there was a show called Travelers also on Netflix, and season 2 had a storyline that was very similar. It was about a drug addict and these people from the future give him this, I think it was pills or something, that say, oh, this will cure your heroin addiction. So he takes it to cure his heroin, but then he becomes addicted to these drugs. And see, to me, that doesn't really make any sense. And the whole time he's saying, no, I'm not taking drugs, this is just here to help me heal. But it's obvious he's acting like a drug addict. And it's the same thing with Trish. She's like, oh no, I'm not addicted to this inhaler stuff. But she goes through withdrawals. She goes crazy when she runs out, and she tries to, get Malcolm to give her more or whatever. And it's very obvious it's the exact same thing as drugs. And yes, she's acting like it's something totally different. And it's very obtuse. I mean, I suppose they're trying to say, oh, that's how addicts are, but I think it's confusing, the metaphor, and I just don't like the way it's handled. And the other thing I didn't like was Karl killing himself at the end. It seemed to come out of nowhere. Really, why would he kill himself? He was all for helping Trish get powers. And then Jessica comes and says, like, oh, well, I guess I'll kill myself now. And it seemed to come out of nowhere. Plot convenience. I don't know. I just thought it was a dumb thing. So anyway, my rating for Jessica Jones Season 2 as a whole is an 8 out of 10. Extremely good. Which is the same rating I gave Season 1. As I said, I can't decide which one is better. This was a great season. As I said, there's a lot of positives to it. A lot of dynamic storytelling that I thought worked out very well. A lot of character exploration, particularly of Jessica Jones, I thought worked very well. It didn't have any annoying side characters or stupid side plots like Season 1 did. It was better focused, better paced, but just not as interesting, not as blow me away, not as engaging. But still a great season, but for totally different reasons. Anyway, so that's it for my review of Jessica Jones Season 2. Be sure to check out my channel as I cover many other shows such as Game of Thrones, Star Trek, Babylon 5, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.